So to ride the hype train up to Tears of the Kingdom, which comes out on May 12th, by the way, figured I'd remind you in case you didn't know. But if you are a fan, you probably do know already, but that's besides the point anyways. I've kind of been obsessed with Nintendo for like the last 2 or 3 weeks, I would say, mainly because Tears of the Kingdom is coming out. But I've been like doing I don't know, I've been playing a bunch of Nintendo stuff, been very interested in the topic and stuff. And even though Nintendo as a company is very scummy, and they are not great people, not a good company, very greedy, you know, they're just not great. They do put out very good products, or very good games in this case. If you missed my last video where I talked about why Wind Waker and Twilight Princess aren't on the Switch, you should go check it out. I figure it's pretty interesting, and I do dive a little bit more deep into why I kind of hate Nintendo, to be honest with you. But even though I hate them, I can't get them out of my head, and I am obsessed with their products, as any Nintendo shill, if you would, will be. Now today I figure I'll talk to you about the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack, a add-on to the Nintendo Switch Online membership that came out about 2 years ago, I think, at this point, and adds a bunch of new stuff, but not really a bunch. I'm gonna give you the rundown in this video to see if it's worth it for you, because I find it quite interesting, especially after 2 years of them adding content, how little they've really added. So let's not get confused. The original Nintendo Online membership costs $20 a year, which is not bad at all, in my opinion. Now, that Nintendo Switch Online for $20 a year, you get the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the SNES. You get the Game Boy, like the original Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, all that stuff, Game Boy games, and that's really it. Now, I'm not going to give you the rundown of what is included in the NES, SNES, and Game Boy archive for games for the actual Nintendo Online for $20 a year, because that's not the point of this video. In my opinion, just straight up, I will say that's totally worth it. Plus, you get all the online features of Nintendo, and even though Nintendo's online features aren't great, you know, they really don't know how to do online that well, I still think it's worth it, and it's just a nice little add-on, you know. And you know, Microsoft makes you pay for Xbox Live or Game Pass if you have that, and Sony makes you pay for PlayStation Plus and all that, so I don't think it's unreasonable to pay for that, but I figure I'd just tell you what that is, how much it is, and the benefits of having it. But now onto the expansion pack. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Now, they do have a few game archives, but I'm gonna skip over those right now to get to the easier stuff at the moment. So to start off, one of the benefits of having the expansion pack is you get DLC for a few games. The first one is Splatoon 2. You get the DLC, and I have it pulled up in front of me, called Octo Expansion. Now, I've never played any Splatoon game. I don't know how important this is to people, but I figure I'll let you know. It does include that DLC, so you don't have to buy it if you already have the expansion pack. Animal Crossing New Horizons also has a DLC, Happy Home Paradise, which I assume adds more content. Yet again, I don't really play Animal Crossing, but I know people really like it. So if you don't want to pay for it, if you don't want to pay for the DLC and you already are planning on having the expansion pack, this is also included. And last but not least for the DLC, the Booster Course Pass for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which adds a ton of new cups and a ton of new courses, and they're still adding them over time, of course. And there are a bunch of old courses, completely remade Mario Kart 8. This is totally worth it, in my opinion. It's $25 separately, the DLC, so you can just buy it, which, you know, I would honestly recommend, so you're not tied to a subscription for it. But it is also included in the expansion pack, in case you were already getting the expansion pack anyways. Alright, gamers, and now we are on to the game archives, and we'll start with the big one, the Nintendo 64. Now, if I'm being completely honest with you, I do not remember how many games the N64 had when it first launched, but I know it was not a lot at all. I am fairly confident it had like 6, maybe 7 games at launch. But what I can tell you about today is how many they have now. And so in your Nintendo 64 archive in this expansion pass, you get Yoshi's Story for the N64. You get Winback Covert Operations for the N64. You get Super Mario 64, classic game. Star Fox 64, another classic. You get Sin and Punishment, Not a game I'm very familiar with. In fact, the title here is, I'm pretty sure, in Japanese, so I have literally no idea what it is, but it is there if you're interested, if you know what it is. You have Mario Tennis for the N64, Mario Kart for the N64, Dr. Mario 64. It's a fun game, I would say. You have The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, a truly classic and probably my favorite N64 game and my favorite game on this archive because it's just timeless for me. I'm obsessed with the game and I love it so much. And to tie with that, they also have The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask for the N64, the direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, which is also incredible of a game. You have F-Zero X, not a game I'm very familiar with, but it is on there. You have Banjo-Kazooie, another classic 3D platformer that is included with the N64 archive, and the original Paper Mario, if you were curious about it. You have Mario Golf, Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards, Pokemon Snap. Now, I'm not a big Pokemon guy, but I know people are obsessed with Pokemon in general, but I've heard a lot about Pokemon Snap, so if that's something you're interested in, it is available there. Pokemon Puzzle League, not quite sure what that is, but it's on there. You have Wave Race 64, a jet ski racing game. It's actually pretty fun, I've tried it out a little bit. Pilot Wing 64, pretty hard to control, but it can be fun, I would say. You also have Mario Party 1 and Mario Party 2, the originals, and Pokemon Stadium was just added. I know people really like Pokemon Stadium, and the big one to end it off, GoldenEye. The original N64 GoldenEye is available on here, and you can play online with friends, so I think that's really cool. Now, Xbox did a re-release of GoldenEye N64, which controls a lot better than this version on here, but this version does have the edge, as in it does have online play if you have online friends to play with. Alright, next up we're going to pull up the Sega Genesis archive, and yet again, I don't know how many they had at launch, but the games they have now are Strider. You have Streets of Rage 2, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, not the first one for some reason, but they do have the second one on here. Shinobi 3, Gunstar Heroes, Musha, Phantasy Star 4, Ristar, Shining Force, Golden Axe, Echo the Dolphin, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. I had to read that one because I couldn't process it in my head. Contra Hardcore, Castlevania Bloodlines. Castlevania is a very popular series. You have Altered Beast, Dynamite Heady, not familiar with that. Sword of Vermilion, Thunder Force 2, Toe Jam and Earl. I have no idea what this game's name is. I can't really read it, but it's up on screen right now, so you can see it. Light Crusader, Alien Soldier, Head Harrier 2, Sonic Spinball, Comics Zone, Mega Man The Wheelie Wars, Target Earth, Zero Wing, Shining Force 2, Earthworm Jim, Beyond Oasis, Alicia Dragon, Virtua Fighter 2, Golden Axe 2, Kid Chameleon, Pulseman, Columns, Alien Storm, Flicky, and of course, to end off on the big one, you have Street Fighter 2. I mean, it's Street Fighter. Who doesn't like some good old Street Fighter? Now, obviously, I went over these ones a lot faster because I'm not familiar with a lot of these games. I never had a Sega Genesis. This was before my time, so, I never grew up playing any of these games, really. But I am familiar with a few of the titles, but I just figured I'd tell you that. But if you are interested in any of those games, there are a lot of games in the Sega Genesis bundle, and they're adding more over time anyways. So if you're interested in any of these or a lot of these, this just might be worth it for you. And to cap off the expansion pass, we have the Game Boy Advance, which was just recently added, like back in February, actually. Just as the Game Boy was added back in February, they were added together, but the Game Boy was for the normal Nintendo Switch Online, and the Game Boy Advance is with the expansion pack. So it only has 7 games right now, which is not a lot, but I figure I'll tell you them anyways. So the first one we have is WarioWare Incorporated. Never played the game, but it is another Wario game, so that's always fun. Super Mario Advance 4, which is just a reskinned version of Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario Bros. 3. You have Mario Kart Super Circuit, which is another Mario Kart game, but built for the Game Boy Advance. You have Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, kind of a team-up game. You have The Legend of Zelda, The Minish Cap, a pretty fun game, and the accidental tune link I put in the thumbnail on my last video. So that's always fun. You have Kurin. I have no idea what that is. I had to read it. I couldn't even look at the camera. I forgot what it was called. And then, of course, Metroid Fusion, which you have Metroid games on the NES, SNES, and Game Boy Advance, and the Game Boy virtual consoles. So you actually do get a lot of Metroid content across all of them in general. So I figured I'd just point that out if you're a huge Metroid fan. And with that being said, that is all the expansion pass currently offers. If you think it's worth it, it's $50 a year, which is a significant increase over the normal. That is more than double the price of the normal. And when you look at PlayStation Plus, the lowest tier is like $60 a year. I don't really know what it is for Xbox because I pay for Game Pass monthly, but it's not terrible, but it could be so much better. And especially with how bad Nintendo's online services are, like, is it really worth the $50? I don't know. Are they gonna budge on it? No, it's Nintendo. They never will. And even though I did show you a grand assortment of games today that come with Nintendo Switch Online plus the expansion pass, they've been drip feeding us. Like all those Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis games that I listed, there were a lot of them, sure, but those were released like 2 years ago. And so over 2 years, we only got like 10, maybe 15 games, which is severe drip feeding. And there's only 7 games on the Game Boy Advance, and they haven't added anything since I launched in February, and they're probably going to be drip feeding us content there too. So just keep that in mind. If there's something that's not on there and you're like hoping they'll add it, they might not. Or if they do, it might take a very, very long time. But yeah, overall, that's what the expansion pass adds. So if you're interested, I guess go for it. Also, with the Nintendo 64 Online, all the controls are mapped to the Nintendo Switch controllers. But for Nintendo 64, it's the only virtual console on the Switch that has 3D capabilities. And so therefore, it is very frustrating to play some games because they have very outdated controls on the N64. And like, there's no dual analog support or anything. It's literally just ripped from the N64, imported onto the Switch. They didn't really do anything to help make playing the games easier or anything like that. Now, Nintendo does sell a $50 wireless Nintendo 64 controller that you can use for the Switch Online if you want to, but it's always sold out. And even if you get it, like, is it really worth it? It might be to you, but I don't know. So yeah, those are just a couple things to keep in mind. There is a large assortment of games, but the price increase is significant, and the N64 has some awful controls sometimes. I'm just going to be straight up and blunt about it. As for the Sega Genesis, if you're interested in any of those games, they have a lot, but they don't, appeal to me personally because I never grew up with them or have a huge interest in any of them. And the Game Boy Advance was just added. Like I said, I'm not going over the normal tiers for the Game Boy, the NES, or the SNES, but they have a ton of games that are actually worth it. So personally, I would say fully worth it for the normal $20 a year Nintendo Online. But with the expansion pass, with these 3 virtual consoles, plus the Mario Kart DLC, the Splatoon 2 DLC, and the Animal Crossing New Horizons DLC. For me, it's worth it because I like playing a lot of N64 games. I'm obsessed with them. I'm replaying through Ocarina of Time right now, actually, on my N64, instead of emulating it like I usually do. So I would say if you have any, interest in any of these virtual consoles, I would say it's actually worth it. If you're just getting it for the DLC for the other games like Mario Kart or something, and that's really it, you're not interested in these virtual consoles, don't get it. Just pay for the DLC. It's just so much better than being tied to a subscription. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. I kind of gave you the full rundown, and if you want any more info, I guess ask me about it and see if I can provide any. But yeah, that's about it. See ya.